Welcome back to Hardball. Republicans are back on Benghazi again, using a new bipartisan report from the Senate Intelligence Committee to attack Hillary Clinton before the 2016 presidential race even begins. Let's be clear, the report did not find any evidence of a cover-up. However, it did find that the attack that killed 4 Americans was, quote, preventable, based on the known security shortfalls at the U.S. mission and warnings from the intelligence community beforehand about the deteriorating and dangerous situation there. Well, there you have it. In an addendum from Republican members of the Intelligence Committee, they set their sights on the former secretary herself, saying, quote, at the end of the day, she was responsible for ensuring the safety of all Americans serving in our diplomatic facilities. Her failure to do so clearly made a difference in the lives of the 4 murdered Americans and their families. And one Republican member of the committee, Marco Rubio, who's also obviously a candidate for president next time, began to lay the groundwork for a 2016 campaign against Hillary Clinton. Here he goes.
She has ultimate responsibility, Secretary Clinton did at the time, for the security of our personnel. No one has been held accountable to date. Certainly none of the decision makers have. And as she herself says, the buck stops at the top, and she was in charge of the State Department at the time. I think anyone's record when they run for president is going to be carefully examined, and if in fact she decides to run, this is a part of her record that will have, and rightfully so, careful examination.
Congressman Jim Moran is a Democrat from Virginia, and James Carafano is Vice President for Foreign Affairs and Defense Policy at the Heritage Foundation. Mr. Moran, let me ask you about this whole question. If you read the report, her name never comes up. Is it fair for the Republicans to say that anything that goes bad among our 300-some facilities around the world, anybody that gets killed, anything that happens is the fault of the Secretary of State? Because that seems to be what they're saying.
You know, it's a stretch. You know that, Chris. She did not do anything that would cause any culpability, any charge of culpability on the Secretary's part. You know, you can say that the commander-in-chief of the military is responsible for every military fatality, but, you know, it's a stretch. Common sense tells you that people who make decisions are accountable for the results of that decision. Hillary Clinton did not make any decisions that resulted in the death of Ambassador Stevens. If anything, Ambassador Stevens was responsible for what happened, but not culpable. He was loved by the Libyans because he chose not to stay behind walls. He chose to get out among the Libyan people. And twice he rejected the idea of having a security force around him so that he wouldn't be, you know, cut off from the people. The Libyan people loved him. And in fact, it was the Libyans that rescued him from that building and got him to the hospital trying to save his life. Unfortunately, he died of asphyxiation from the smoke and the flames, as did the IT specialist that was with him. Hillary was not culpable, and there was no White House cover-up. And the bipartisan report makes that clear.
Let me go to Mr. Carafano. Carafano, is there any way we're going to ever get a report? I mean, we waited for this report from the Intelligence Committee, and I do believe that Feinstein, although a Democrat, you have to be something. She's a grown-up, and this committee tends to be pretty bipartisan. What do you expect to come out of this thing? I know the Republicans are using it as a battering ram to get to her, but I didn't see it in the report.
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, first of all, I like a lot of things Jim said, and I agree with him. And I really like the report because it does something in a lot of ways that we haven't had before. It's a lot of detailed information. Because my #1 issue always from the beginning hasn't been who's accountable, who's responsible. It was, how did this happen? Because we have embassies, consulates, and missions all over the world. A lot of them are in this category called high risk, which we know people are out to get them. And we know the Islamist terrorist groups like this as a favorite target. We needed to learn everything we could from the situation so we can make sure it didn't happen again. And the thing I love about the report most is it actually gives us a lot of kind of meat and potatoes about how we could have done a lot better.
It also does something that I'm going to argue at the end of the show. It justifies, not that there's not politics in every public statement on every Sunday show. We know that. But on the basic facts, Susan Rice came on television and basically said that this was a result, it looks like, that the best estimate now is that this event occurred, this attack on our facility in Benghazi, followed the all-day coverage in Islamic press and all around the Middle East of what was happening in Cairo that day. What happened in Cairo that day may well have resulted, nobody knows for sure, it seems, based on the protest language of the protesters, had something to do with her anger over that stupid anti-Islamic film made by that nut out in California. So there was a daisy chain of connection. It wasn't some planned al-Qaeda operation. They never said al-Qaeda, and it was certainly done by terrorists because it was an act of terror, and they used the word extremists in the talking points because that's what they use, General Petraeus uses to say terrorists. Jim, all this talk about how Rice got it wrong, I think has been shot down by this bipartisan report.
Yes, I think, Herbert, well, you're talking to James or Jim.
Well, I want to start with you, Congressman Moran, first.
Yeah, okay. I happen to agree with James, too. It seems like we may have a similar perspective. I think there may have been a connection. I don't think that Susan Rice had been given all of the information that we now have available. I think she was going on talking points. Some of those talking points seemed a bit misleading because we really haven't proven the direct connection between that anti-Islamic video and the protest, but that may well have been what sparked it. I'm not sure that that's clear until we bring the individuals to trial who are directly responsible for the deaths. But I think Susan was doing the best she could with the information available, and I don't think it was really fair to make her the scapegoat for what occurred.
Let's look, for example, Mr. Carafano, let's take a look at what Bob Gates, the recent Secretary of Defense, had to say when asked about this by my colleague, Andrea Mitchell. I think it's interesting to always hear what he has to say.
Many Republicans certainly are saying, and critics of Hillary Clinton are saying, that this really is disqualifying for someone who wants to be commander-in-chief if she chooses to run.
But it seems to me that the critical questions are what was offered to the ambassador, what did he reject? What did he ask for? And was it turned down? And if so, who turned it down and in what timeline? And did the question ever get to Hillary, or was the decision made by the undersecretary or the deputy secretary or somebody else?
Well, Mr. Carafano, it seems to me we now know from this bipartisan report that Chris Stevens, who everybody loved, the ambassador in country at the time, basically asked that he would be, he said he wants to rely on the Libyan forces. He was able to line up the militia people. He didn't want more U.S. personnel at that post.
Yeah, well, let me, just to go back to the point about the talking points for a second, one of the things that we are getting more information on is that there were contrasting views about what the source of this was. And I don't necessarily, what I would float the administration on is that is normal. When you're in a crisis situation, normally you get conflicting reports coming in, and you have to kind of sort through that. And if you've got information that directly contradicts other information that you have, I think you've got to deal with that rather than just kind of polish over it in the talking points, because then you wind up in exactly the situation the administration wound up in. You know, this is one of the interesting things.
That's a far cry from the attacks made on Susan Rice, that she somehow, her and the White House staff people, the flacks, if you will, manipulated that. It looks like they went with everything they were given by the intelligence community and went right through with it, what they were given.
But the footnote to that is there was other input which wasn't included, and the question is, was that prudent to make that? But that's a whole other issue. Gates, Gates makes some really good points, and this has really kind of been the thing that we haven't wanted to touch from the beginning, which is normally the ambassador is the head of the country team, and he is responsible for the safety, security, and everybody on the ground. And a lot of these decisions did deal with him, and of course he can't speak for himself because he's dead. And I think we have been very reticent to say, well, was he doing prudent things? Was he excessive risk? This raises more interesting questions, but it still doesn't answer all those either.
I know. Yeah, I think you've said the same thing that Congressman Moran said. The man was a dashing figure, a gutsy guy that went out almost like a Peace Corps volunteer and didn't mind connecting up with people even when there was risk that he knew all about. Anyway, thank you, Congressman Jim Moran.
Right. We need more people like him, Chris.
Well, nobody's questioning his courage. He was a courageous man.
No, he wasn't a pinstripe guy handing out cookies. Anyway, thank you, Congressman Jim Moran and Heritage Foundation's James Carafano. Up next, Benghazi versus the bridge, and why Chris Christie has more to worry about than Hillary Clinton as of this show. And this is Hardball, the place for politics. We're back. Hillary Clinton and Chris Christie are still at the top of the food chain for 2016. They're both leading the polls, but both are also facing big hurdles. Despite weathering the storm for almost a year and a half now, Hillary Clinton's still being dogged by cries of Benghazi. The word itself remains a call to arms among the Republican rank and file. For Chris Christie, his challenges are just beginning. His administration is deeply embroiled in a scandal that's tarnished his brand and threatens to derail his career if he's further ensnared. So if Benghazi and the Bridgegate are pre-existing conditions, who has the bigger challenge moving forward, Hillary or Christie? With us now is MSNBC political analyst Joan Walsh of Salon and Republican pollster Kellyanne Conway, my old friend. Kellyanne, who has the strongest line of defense facing this, Hillary or the governor?
Probably Hillary, but I want to say from the beginning, neither story is great for the respective political futures, but they're also just not on the same scale. I do want to just acknowledge that in Benghazi, people died. I would not want to disrespect them because I'm giving political analysis. But in the case of Bridgegate, the investigations could still be ongoing by the time the presidential campaign is in earnest. And so I think Hillary testified a year ago before Congress. I think what's been different in this case, Chris, is their immediate responses. In other words, you know, Hillary and others blamed a tape instead of blaming the terrorists, said what difference does it make? You know, Christie expressed apology, humiliation, embarrassment. So I think the handling of it was different, but I don't think they're on the same scale. If you gave me like an SAT analogy test and it says Bridgegate is to Christie what blank is to Hillary, very few people, common sense people, would put Benghazi in the blank.
Let me go to you, Joan, about this, because I thought that the news report, and certainly the reading I've done of the Senate committee report by Dianne Feinstein, who is a grown-up, you and I know,
yes,
and it's a sound bipartisan report, it does blame the agency. It blames the State Department whole hog because they're the ones running the show.
Right.
But it didn't show any line to her in terms of a call to her. How about more troops? How about more security? And she said no.
No.
Nothing seemed to tie it to her that I could find.
No, nothing has tied it to her. And Senator Feinstein was even forced to come out today and say, please stop these comparisons and please stop saying that we indicted Secretary Clinton, because we did not. I mean, I really appreciate Kellyanne's honesty. These things are not comparable. Benghazi is a tragedy. It is not a scandal, and no one has ever linked it to Hillary Clinton directly. As you've said before, Ambassador Stevens himself really wanted a light military footprint there and wanted to work with the local folks. Whereas, you know, the bridge scandal is actually a scandal. We do know that some people, whether or not the governor knew about it, actually ordered this as some sort of reprisal, some sort of politics. And it's the kind of thing that Americans really grasp easily. We saw in 2012, Benghazi really didn't get through. Mitt Romney sadly tried to use it. And the American people see it as a fog of war situation. It's only a scandal in the fever swamps on the right, not with the American public.
Well, let me put the question to Kelly, who knows as much about this as anybody, Kellyanne. Come 2016 at the Republican convention, wherever it's held, will not the keynote speaker, will not the people who get up on that platform use the word Benghazi, or will they not? Will it still be a red-hot poker to jam at Hillary Clinton?
Maybe not. I think at that point, her challenges will be many, and Benghazi will be part of it. But her challenges are really going to come from the left. I think what Bridgegate and Benghazi do for each of them is they give people who are already inclined not to support them an excuse to do that. And I think for both of them, they have trouble with their base in that regard. She's got trouble from the left. I think you're going to find people running against her, much to people's surprise. Maybe even Howard Dean is on this network. Why not? And of course, Christie's always had a little bit of trouble from the right. So I think it gives people an excuse. But come the convention and come the Clinton campaign, I think this presidential campaign in 2016, Chris and Joan, is going to be what it always is after a two-term president. Do you want to extend that into the third term, or do you want something totally different? And there is probably a question that goes way beyond Benghazi for Secretary Clinton and into the realm of, are you going to own or disown the Affordable Care Act? Will you own or disown all of his foreign policy? Will you own or disown his economic plan? And
Kellyanne, it took us 7 minutes to get to Affordable Care, but that's all right.
Will certainly not mean anything in a Democratic primary. And if Secretary Clinton is challenged from the left, which right now there's not a single person except maybe Brian Schweitzer who's even talking about it. Governor Dean even said nice things about it the other day. Benghazi will never play a role in a Democratic primary. That will not be
no problem on the left from Benghazi. Thank you, Joan Walsh and Kellyanne Conway. We'll be right back.